The crystal chandeliers of the Waldorf Astoria ballroom sparkled like a scattering of frozen stars, each facet playing and shimmering in the warm light of hundreds of lamps, reflecting the glow onto the faces of people who wore trust funds like pocket change, as if they were commonplace, demanding no special attention. Their silks and velvets, their diamonds and white gold cufflinks, their confident smiles and polished manners all spoke of one thing: success, wealth, and power woven into a single tight knot. Around them, the subtle aroma of expensive perfumes twirled like an invisible veil woven from floral and spicy notes, and the barely perceptible yet unmistakable scent of power and money, that specific fragrance that emanates from people accustomed to luxury and influence, a scent that for me had always been alien and repulsive. I adjusted my second-hand jacket, its worn lapels and slightly baggy cut screaming of my poverty in this sea of impeccable style, feeling like an outsider in every cell of my body, like a stranger at this festival of life. The irony of the situation couldn't be more bitter, like poison slowly spreading through my veins. I was an outsider at my own father's company, Carter Financial Group's 25th anniversary celebration, a company that bore his name and was built on his ambitions, but which, in essence, was also my family, albeit in a distorted, painful sense. This hall, a symbol of luxury and success, a place where destinies were decided and multi-million-dollar deals were made, was a foreign world to me, like a film set I had accidentally wandered into. I was accustomed to the smell of freshly ground coffee, tart and invigorating, and the hum of the coffee machine, steady and soothing, to the subdued light of a cozy coffee shop where every visitor was equal, regardless of the size of their bank account or the brand of their car. There, behind the counter of my coffee shop, I felt at home, among my own, in a world where simple things were valued: delicious coffee, friendly conversation, a quiet corner for reflection. Here, in this hall, every gleaming champagne flute seemed like a mockery of my modest life, every silk tie a symbol of unattainable luxury for me, every hushed whisper made me feel even more out of place, as if I were invisible, a ghost who had wandered into someone else's celebration. My gaze slid across the crowd, as if searching for familiar features, but finding only alienation and indifference. There were faces here that I had seen on the pages of business magazines, cold and calculating, names that had echoed on the evening news, linked to high-profile scandals and dubious deals. This was the world my father had built, a world where money spoke loudest of all, a world where morality and ethics were just empty words, a world I never wanted to be a part of, a world that seemed dirty and hypocritical to me. But, as it turned out, a world that somehow still caught up with me, like an inescapable shadow, pursuing me despite all my attempts to escape. I felt like a fly caught in a spider web. The more I tried to break free, the more entangled I became. Ladies and gentlemen, my father's voice, amplified by the microphone, boomed through the hall like a thunderclap, sharp and authoritative, causing conversations to subside and heads to turn to the stage, as if on command from an invisible conductor. His smile, honed to perfection over years of public speaking, shone like a false jewel, captivating the gazes of everyone present, as if hypnotizing them with his charm. Thank you for celebrating with the people who built this company, my executive team, our investors. His eyes scanned the rows, as if searching the hall for important figures, skipping over me. Sitting in the very last row, as if I were invisible, a speck of dust on an expensive carpet, a random stain on an impeccable picture of success. And, of course, family. The word family sounded false on his lips, like a false note in a flawless symphony, a dissonance that shattered the harmony of the moment. Family. He was talking about Brittany, my half-sister, who sat in the front row like royalty on a throne, basking in the rays of her father's glory, like a princess who had inherited a kingdom. Family. For him, this word seemed to mean only those who fit his idealized image, those who were an extension of himself, those who fit into the framework of his successful life, like expensive accessories complementing his image, those who brought him profit and social capital, like investments yielding dividends. I obviously did not fit into this framework. I was an exception to the rule, a black mark on a snow-white reputation, a reminder of another life that he tried to forget. Suddenly, a waiter bumped my elbow, like a clumsy angel descending from heaven, distracting me from bitter thoughts, as if tearing me from the abyss of self-flagellation. "More coffee, miss?" he asked politely, his voice quiet and courteous, his face expressing professional blankness, like a mask concealing true emotions. "No, thank you," I replied quietly, trying not to attract attention like a mouse hiding in a corner, wishing to remain unnoticed. But it was too late, as if the fateful moment had arrived, and it was no longer possible to dodge it. Brittany, like a predator tracking its prey, her eyes sharp and tenacious, like claws, had already noticed this moment, this second of my vulnerability, like the scent of blood in the air. She turned in her seat, her silk dress rustling like snakeskin, her strained smile bearing sharp razor-like teeth, ready to sink into flesh. "She's not staff, she's just like that." She hissed loudly enough for those sitting nearby to hear, her words like a spit in the face, full of contempt and arrogance. The hall erupted in quiet laughter, like a pack of hyenas that had caught the scent of blood, a sound full of malice and cruelty. The laughter was short, restrained, like a hint at an indecent joke, but no less painful for it, like a knife blow to the ribs. It was the laughter of the rich and privileged, the laughter of those accustomed to looking down on those who, in their opinion, stood lower than them on the social ladder, laughter that humiliated and insulted. My cheeks flushed, as if I had been slapped in the face, like a public humiliation. The humiliation was so obvious, so deliberate, it was like a performance staged just for me. My father's smile on stage, until that moment impeccable, like a mask, became evil, predatory, like the snarl of a wolf baring its fangs. In his eyes, a flash of rage flickered, like lightning piercing the night sky, which he usually so carefully hid behind a mask of respectability, as if he was keeping a beast in a cage. "Forgive my daughter Amy," he said into the microphone, his voice now sounding with a distinct note of venom, like a drop of poison, slowly poisoning the atmosphere. "She prefers to languish as a barista instead of joining the family business." An awkward clinking of glasses echoed in the hall, as if in memory of my inadequacy, like a funeral knell for my ambitions, for my refusal to meet his expectations, like a sentence passed on me in absentia. I felt like an exhibit under glass, in a freak show, put on public display, like an insect pinned to a display case, dissected and assessed by cold, indifferent glances, like an object of ridicule and contempt. Every gaze directed at me was like a prick, every whisper, like the hiss of snakes. It was at this moment when the humiliation reached its peak, as if the cup of patience had overflowed, when I was ready to fall through the floor, if only to disappear from this cursed place, that Harrison, my father's perpetually sweaty CFO, rushed to my side, his face, usually pale and expressionless, turning crimson, like an overripe tomato. His breathing was ragged, as if he had run a marathon, panting and gasping for air. "Miss Carter," he gasped, his voice barely audible, like a whisper in the wind, grabbing my hand, his fingers digging into my wrist, like a drowning man clutching at a lifeline, desperately clinging to the last hope. "We need your signature on the emergency credit package. The Swiss deal has fallen through. Without liquidity by morning, the banks—" He didn't finish, his words drowned in panic and despair. The room swam before my eyes, as if the world around me had begun to fall apart, like a kaleidoscope that had lost its shape. My signature? Why my signature? I was just a shadow in this world of big money, an invisible ghost, just an unseen spectator in the theater of my father's success, a random guest at his festival of life. And suddenly, my signature? What did I have to do with all this? Then, like a lightning strike, like a revelation suddenly illuminating my mind, my mother's will flashed in my memory, her words spoken in a quiet but firm voice, her voice, despite her weakness, sounding confident and resolute, before the illness finally took away her strength, before darkness swallowed her light. "Amy, my share of the company, 51%. It passes to you." Mom. Her image arose before me, clear and bright, like a beacon in the night. She always believed in me, even when my father looked right through me, as if through empty space, as if I were invisible. She saw my potential, hidden beneath a layer of insecurity and modesty, my strength, which I myself had not yet realized, my ability to be something more than just the daughter of the owner of Carter Financial Group, more than just my father's shadow. And she left me this trump card, a last gift, this unexpected card in a game I never intended to play, but in which, as it turned out, I had been playing since birth. When Mom died, it was as if the sun had gone out, her 51% stake passed to me. A fact that my father had spent a decade, as if deliberately forgetting, as if hiding the truth in the far corner of his consciousness, hoping it would never surface. He obviously hoped that I would remain in ignorance, that I would continue to live my modest barista life, far from his world of big money, unaware of the power that actually belonged to me, like a sleeping beauty, unaware of her royal origins. But fate, or rather the Swiss deal, chance, the intervention of higher powers, had its own plans, intentions that were still unclear to me, but which felt like inevitability. Harrison, still breathing heavily, like a hunted beast, dragged me into a private lounge, like a policeman leading a criminal for interrogation, like a guard escorting a prisoner. The room was furnished with the same ostentatious luxury as the ballroom, but here there was an ominous silence, heavy and oppressive, like the pre-storm stillness, broken only by Harrison's heavy breathing and the quiet ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece, like the countdown to an imminent catastrophe. He laid out the documents on a polished mahogany table, like a magician showing cards, fanning them out, as if preparing for a magic trick. Standard bridge financing? Just need the signature of the majority shareholder. His voice trembled with tension like a taut string, drops of sweat streamed down his temples, shiny and cold, despite the air conditioning working at full power, as if he were in tropical heat. I took the documents. The papers were thin and crisp. My fingers trembled, hesitantly flipping through the pages, but not from fear, not from fright, but from a strange growing excitement, like a premonition of a storm, an anticipation of change. I scanned the pages, my eyes, trained to read the fine print of coffee bean labels, accustomed to meticulous work, quickly gliding over the lines of legal jargon, as if scanning the text for the information I needed. And there, in Clause 14, B, like a hidden diamond in a pile of garbage, like treasure buried at the bottom of a chest, I found what I was looking for, words that changed everything. "Wait," I said. My voice sounded unexpectedly firm, like steel, contrasting with my inner turmoil, like a quiet but confident bell strike. I pointed my finger at Clause 14. B, like a pointer directing attention to an important detail. This gives me voting rights if the payment is overdue by 90 days. Harrison froze, like a trapped beast, like a deer caught in headlights. His eyes widened in horror, like two dark wells, sweat beaded on his forehead even more profusely, large drops like dew on the grass. He obviously did not expect that I would read the documents, that I understood anything at all in these complex financial intricacies, that I was capable of making sense of the thicket of legal language. He, like my father, underestimated me, considered me stupid and naive, incapable of serious actions. The door burst open, as if from an explosion, with a crash, like a gunshot, and my father stormed into the room, like an enraged bull, his tie askew, his impeccable suit rumpled, his face contorted with anger, like a mask of hatred. "Sign the damn papers, Amy!" "This isn't one of your little games in the coffee shop." His words were like a spit, full of contempt and irritation, as if I were nothing to him, an empty space. He still saw me as just a little girl, an unreasonable child, incapable of something serious, not understanding adult matters, not worthy of his attention and respect. I picked up the pen, its cold metal pleasantly cooling my fingers, which Harrison dutifully extended to me, like a devoted servant, but did not rush to sign, did not hurry, savoring the moment of power. I looked my father straight in the eyes, for the first time in a long time not looking away, meeting his angry gaze with my calm and firm one. In his eyes, besides anger, a flicker of fear flashed, fleeting, almost imperceptible, like a shadow, but I saw it, discerned it in the depths of his pupils. And this fear gave me strength, like a breath of fresh air, like a shot of adrenaline. "First, apologize," I said quietly, but every word sounded distinctly, clear, and precise, like a hammer blow, breaking the silence. "To me, to every waiter you've ever shortchanged." My father laughed. A coarse, unpleasant laugh, a sound like the screech of metal, full of contempt, like mockery, a sneer at my demand. "Are you kidding me?" "No," I replied, my voice becoming firmer, unshakable, like a rock. "Apologize or I won't sign." His laughter suddenly broke off, as if he choked, turning into a hoarse cough, as if he choked on his own anger, as if the poison he was spewing had returned to him. He looked at me, his eyes burning with rage, like embers in a fireplace, but doubt had already flickered in them, a shadow of uncertainty. He realized that I was not kidding, that I was serious, that I was really ready to go all the way, that I would not back down. Slowly, as if each word was torn from him with pain, like pulling a tooth, he mumbled, "Sorry." It was barely audible, almost indistinguishable, like the whisper of a dying man, but I heard it, caught every word, every tremor of his voice. And that was enough. This humiliation, this recognition of my power was enough to begin with. I took the papers, they trembled in my hands, but instead of signing, putting my signature that could save his company, I tore them in half with a sharp movement, then again and again, tearing them into small pieces until only scraps of paper remained from the emergency credit package, useless fragments like ashes scattered in the wind. Silence hung in the room, thick and heavy, as if time had stopped, as if everything had frozen in anticipation. Harrison looked at me in horror, his eyes full of panic, my father, with rage and bewilderment, as if he could not believe what had happened. "New terms," I said, my voice sounding even and calm, throwing the scraps of documents onto the table, like unnecessary garbage, like waste that no longer had value. "You resign. The board of directors votes for a real CEO. And Brittany?" I turned my gaze to my half-sister, who had frozen in the doorway like a statue, watching what was happening with her mouth open, her face expressing a mixture of shock and disbelief. I glanced at her lacquered Louboutin shoes, expensive and vulgar, her designer dress, garishly luxurious, all her ostentatious luxury, like a masquerade costume. "We'll get exactly what she gave me, nothing." Dead silence reigned in the hall, as if all living things had frozen, as if breath had stopped. Only my breathing was audible, even and calm, like a light breeze, and Harrison's ragged breathing, heavy and hoarse, like a death rattle. My father was silent, as if he had lost the power of speech, as if he was numb with shock. Brittany looked as if she had been electrocuted, paralyzed by horror and anger. Thus began my 3 months at the helm of Carter Group, 3 months that turned my life upside down, 3 months that seemed both an eternity and a moment, like a dream and reality intertwined into one. I ran the company ethically, honestly, and fairly, as my mother had taught me. Her voice sounded in my head like a guiding star. I paid employees a decent salary, canceled bonuses for top managers, did not allow myself the luxury that my subordinates could not afford, lived modestly and honestly, setting an example. I fired the predatory lenders who profited from other people's misfortunes, driving them out like snakes from the temple. I tried to build a company that my mother would be proud of, a company that would serve people, society, and not just enrich a handful of chosen ones, a company with a human face. It was hard, incredibly hard. Like climbing Everest, every step was difficult. I faced resistance, open and hidden, sabotage, attempts to undermine my authority, distrust, constant doubt in my abilities. Many old employees, accustomed to the old ways, to corruption and cronyism, looked at me with suspicion, as if at a stranger, considering me an upstart, an incompetent girl, a temporary figure who would soon be gone. Investors were unhappy with my untraditional methods, my too ethical decisions, considering them naive and impractical, fearing to lose profits. But I did not give up, did not retreat a single step. I believed in what I was doing, in my righteousness. I knew that it was right, that this was the only way to save the company and my soul. And for a while it seemed to me that I was succeeding, that I was on the right track, that there was still light at the end of the tunnel. The company began to change, albeit slowly, gradually, but surely, like a ship changing course. Employees became more loyal, felt part of something bigger. Clients, more satisfied, seeing honesty and openness. Even profits, contrary to the expectations of skeptics, did not fall, but on the contrary, began to grow, slowly but surely, albeit not as rapidly as under my father, but honestly and legally. But it was only a brief glimmer of hope, an illusion of success, like a mirage in the desert. Soon, clouds gathered over my head, like an approaching storm, and thunder struck unexpectedly and mercilessly, destroying all my hopes. A letter from the SEC arrived on the most ordinary working day, an ordinary day that forever changed my life, like an ominous omen, like a black mark. "Fake offshore accounts," the SEC agent stated dryly, his voice impassive and official, sitting opposite me in my office, an office that had recently belonged to my father, an office that had become a trap for me. "Your father's signature, but dated after his resignation." I looked at the documents. The papers were like a sentence, presented by the agent, the letters blurred before my eyes. My father's signature was undoubtedly his. I would recognize it out of 1,000. I remembered every stroke, every line. But the dates were forged, changed, falsified. Someone was trying to frame me, accuse me of crimes I had not committed, make me a scapegoat. And this someone was clever and influential enough to deceive the SEC, to forge evidence, to convince everyone of my guilt. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and betrayal, a sharp and bitter smell, like the smell of death. The smell was sharp, suffocating, as if I was being strangled by invisible hands, as if I was suffocating in an atmosphere of lies and hypocrisy. I sat in the dock, like a beast in a cage, feeling like a hunted animal, a defenseless victim in someone else's game. Around me were unfamiliar faces, cold and indifferent, faces full of curiosity and condemnation, like spectators at gladiatorial combats. In the front row sat Brittany, her face expressing a mixture of triumph and nervousness, as if she had won, but was afraid of losing her victory. And in the center of the hall, like the main character of this nightmarish spectacle, in the witness stand, sat my father. His smirk said it all, cynical and gloating, like a seal placed on my sentence. He had framed me, betrayed me, sent me to the guillotine. He had planned it from the very beginning, from the moment I tore up the documents in the Waldorf Astoria ballroom, from the moment I dared to challenge him. He let me run the company, gave me hope, like a toy, and then snatched that hope from my hands, cruelly and mercilessly, like a cruel child breaking a favorite toy, depriving me of everything I had. 12 counts of financial fraud, the judge said monotonously, his voice sounding like a funeral knell echoing in the silence of the hall. Sentencing is adjourned until... The roar of a gunshot shattered the silence of the hall, sharp and deafening, like the sound of a champagne bottle bursting, ironically contrasting with that very ballroom where it all began, where my story of falling began. Brittany screamed. Her scream, full of horror and pain, echoed through the hall like the cry of a wounded bird. My father collapsed to the floor, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, blood spreading across his white shirt, slowly and inexorably, like an ominous flower blooming on a snow-white canvas. The true mastermind, the puppet master, Harrison, holding a smoking gun in his hand, lowered the gun, his face contorted in sobs, his body convulsing. "Loose ends," he muttered incoherently. His words were meaningless babble, his speech was disjointed, his words drowned in the chaos of screams and commotion, in general madness. Had to remove the loose ends. An orange prison jumpsuit makes my face pale and sickly, as if draining the last colors of life from me. Funny, I always preferred coffee stains, coffee streaks on my apron, on my hands. They, at least, were honest, deserved, earned by labor, hard work, and not by shame, not by the brand of a criminal.